Well, we have some severe weather to deal with here over the next few days, tomorrow night, into the day on Saturday. We will get in there and discuss all of the parameters and everything to get you guys ready for the potential of severe weather coming up on this edition of the forecast with Stingray and TP. Welcome inside another edition of the forecast with Stingray and TP. I am your host, Stephen Ray, and today was a gorgeous day across a good portion of the southeast, and tomorrow will be the same. However, we do have weather coming in the pre-dawn hours on Saturday morning, and then potentially another round Saturday afternoon, depending on how all of the atmosphere revamps or not. But let me go on ahead and pull up my co-host Taylor Plott, and we will get in here and discuss all of that here right now. Taylor, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, Steven. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man, and thank you for joining me. And I tell you what, man, we've got a complex little situation coming up here over the next few days because the models have actually not been handling it very well. They've been placing the low in different locations each model run.
Yeah, and the latest ones have kind of narrowed in the kind of zone to get this area low pressure developing. And actually,
Yes.
what I think might actually end up happening is the parent low might be off to our north, and we get what's called a meso low that kind of goes across parts of central Alabama, and that can
Yes.
actually uh, kind of throw a wrench into some of the possibilities going on. It can also it can basically enhance the threat for any stronger severe storms. So
Yes.
it's something we'll have to watch for.
All right, well, let me go on ahead and pull up this, and let me just go on ahead and show you that tomorrow we actually have the majority of the severe weather will be basically from Jackson, Mississippi, and points back off to the southwest, all the way down into near Houston, Texas. So tomorrow is going to be pretty much a system for Mississippi. But as we get into the pre dawn hours on Saturday, that's when it becomes more of an issue for us here in Alabama.
Yeah, and so what the Storm Prediction Center is showing there, the bulk of the activity on Friday for tomorrow is going to be off to the west
Yeah.
of the state of Alabama, and even for the majority of the day, it's going to be west of the state of Mississippi. You're talking about mainly in Texas and parts of Oklahoma. That little jut out that you see there with the slight risk and even the marginal risk that gets further into the state of Alabama, that's going to be during the nighttime hours Friday and into the overnight hours going into Sunday, or excuse me, Saturday
Yes.
morning. And so that spot there from, say, Vicksburg over to Jackson, over to the Hattiesburg area, that slight risk, that's going to be more in line of after 6 p.m.
Yes.
on Friday. And then when it gets into the state of Alabama, it's probably well after midnight when that happens.
So here is a local view for our friends over here in Mississippi. Basically, if you are from Yazoo City, Mississippi to Philadelphia and points off to the south, you are in the slight risk area for severe storms possible, damaging winds 60 to 70. Quarter-sized hail and tornadoes are possible. If you're up there a little bit further off to the north, a few storms are possible, but guys are in the marginal risk. And once again, this is from late Friday night into early Saturday morning. Now, let me take you over here and show you the prediction for Saturday. And as you can see, there is a good portion of central and southern Alabama that is underneath a slight risk of severe weather. And the main window for severe storms Saturday would be 3 a.m. until 11 a.m. on Saturday. However, some of the models that we're actually going to get into here in just a little bit have actually slowed it down even more. Hail and strong winds are possible with some of the heavier storms, and an isolated tornado or two is possible as well.
Yeah, and the thing to deal with for the Saturday system is uh, again you can't get too technical with this, especially with the Storm Prediction Center's outlook. You saw that marginal risk from Friday that gets into part of the state that runs the way that they do what's called their day one outlook. It goes until 7 a.m. the next day, and so in this case, this Saturday outlook is from 7 a.m. on Saturday until 7 a.m. on Sunday.
Right.
So basically, in a nutshell, at least for the state of Alabama, if you live along and south of Interstate 20, that's where your highest chance to see a severe thunderstorm or a tornado will be for Saturday morning. Now, the question that remains, like you alluded to earlier, Stephen, is the what will happen Saturday afternoon.
Yes.
That's still up in the air. The overall severe weather risk with this is definitely on the lower side of things. It's not your typical outbreak type of setup, but I can see where we can get some pretty nasty winds coming our way with a possible MCS moving on in. And yeah, there could be a tornado or two with that. But the question remains: the afternoon is we got a lot of dry air moving in, and the front that's moving in, the way that the winds become oriented, you lose a lot of what's called convergence. You got that wind that's kind of coming up into the cold front, and then it gets lifted up. So you're losing that. So it's possible we might just not really have much in the way of activity Saturday afternoon, but that's something we'll have to watch.
And another thing that we need to talk about too is regardless if you see severe weather, you're going to see a whole lot of rain out of this, and there is a good swath along the 2059 corridor that could see 2 to 3 inches of rain with this system, and that does include the Tuscaloosa Metro and the far southern fringe of the Birmingham Metro as well.
Yeah, and so once that wave, first batch of rain moves in, basically, kind of in a nutshell, again, if you live north of I-20, you're going to see rain and stuff moving in, but most of you guys are just going to be seeing the chance for some heavier rainfall, some thunder, lightning, and maybe some brief gusty winds, and that's it. There's really no severe weather risk for you guys. If you live Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Anniston, Oxford, south towards Montgomery, down to Demopolis and north of Mobile, that's where that main batch, the main area of the line of storms moves on in, and that's where you're going to get your heavier rainfall with that. So yeah, there could definitely be locations getting around 2-3 inches of rain, maybe even a little bit higher in some places.
So, well, that's all that I have. So I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to pull up your computer and we are going to go through and let you run through the models and show everybody what's going on and how this is all going to progress.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and just say this just right off the bat. It's a tricky forecast.
Right.
And I have better confidence that if we're going to see severe weather for us here in Alabama on Saturday, it's going to be with the morning round. But this is what's going to happen on Friday. This is a high resolution NAM model, and this is the latest. This is the 18Z runs. This happened a little bit earlier this afternoon. So as we get into the day on Friday, this is 7 a.m. Friday, probably going to see some what we call prefrontal showers during the morning hours. Some of those not really too heavy. And then it's not until we get into the afternoon hours Friday, you start to see thunderstorm activity blossom here across parts of Texas, even into parts of Kansas and Oklahoma and Arkansas as well. Your main severe weather risk for Friday is going to be basically from, say, around the Oklahoma City area down to the Dallas-Fort Worth, maybe a little bit north than that. Kind of that I-35 corridor is kind of your primary zone for your Friday. And then those storms start to move on into parts of the Arklatex region, Texarkana, up to Arkansas. Another batch over here along the I-44 corridor from Joplin, Missouri, all the way down to Tulsa and into Oklahoma City. And then what we'll watch for is this batch down here for our area. You got two areas that will be going on region wide. You're gonna have an MCS over here, and then this cluster that's going on over here. So this is midnight going into Saturday morning. So I'm gonna flip on over to our area. So once this moves in, this is the first wave potentially, and all the instability is going to be very tricky to kind of pinpoint. And models have continued to kind of show it should remain relatively confined to an area here along the coast. Here's the instability values. And I will say this, there are definitely times, especially in these situations, where there's really high shear in place.
Yeah.
And even though you might not be where this blue area is, it's possible that there could be just enough, I mean, really, really just enough surface-based instability that continues along with these storms. Sometimes they can kind of suck in that a warm, moist air, kind of pull it in, and it is a very, very thin line of instability that is really just riding on just ahead of where the storms are. And so while you might not see this blue get further to the north, as you see here, until the morning hours, that's where you have that influx behind the main line. We'll go back to reflectivity real quick. So notice how basically everything's back behind here.
Yep.
But it's possible, and I've seen this happen before, to where if you get this line that moves on through, this mesolow that does indeed occur, it can pull in just enough Gulf of Mexico moisture and just enough surface-based instability. I mean, on the orders of about maybe 50 to 100 joules per kilogram. I mean, very, very, very meager amount. But if we got a lot of forcing to work with, and so it's possible that could just be enough to keep these storms maybe strong to severe as they start to move into our area. But it's a fine line. It's going to be a fine line, and some of the latest guidance has kind of weakened this line as it moves on through. This is 6 a.m. Saturday morning, at least according to the NAM model here. Line of storms back here off to the west from, say, Florence down to Columbus, Mississippi, down towards the Jackson area. Other batch here across the I-65 corridor. And then that moves in. And then this is an interesting feature that the high-resolution NAM has kind of been picking up on. And I've been seeing this over the past few runs now. And I can see how this could definitely be the case. So one of the scenarios that I can see panning out is you get this kind of batch of showers and storms moving on in. There may be a few severe thunderstorm warnings out there, maybe one or two tornado warnings at best across the area, mainly along and south of Interstate 20. Then that batch weakens as we get into the just after sunrise here. Here's 7 a.m. Saturday. And then the front, what happens with the front, it kind of drapes across the area here. And the way that it ends up being oriented, you get a little bit more convergence going on. Here's the winds, and this is the front. This is the front right here. The wind's going to change from a more southerly direction to more of a westerly, southwesterly direction where the front moves in. And if this happens, if that orientation of the front ends up being more west-southwest to northeast-northeast as opposed to more of a kind of northeast to southwest component, I guess, if you will, the way that the winds at the surface are acting, you get more convergence going on if it gets angled a little more towards the east. And so that would increase our convergence to lift along the front, and you end up getting more showers and storms that develop along it. and that kind of continues to track on in. Now, if that is the case, then I think that the threat during the afternoon hours becomes a little bit less conditional. There is a lot of dry air that begins to move in behind that first initial wave. And sometimes if you get too much dry air going on in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, you really just can't get updrafts that form.
Real quick, Taylor.
The way that it looks like it could become unstable during the afternoon hours is it's not necessarily alarming in a sense because there's not a lot of low-level shear to work with, so you wouldn't really be dealing with a tornado threat with this. But if we do get any updrafts that can get going in this environment Saturday afternoon, then damaging winds would definitely be a possibility with it. But also, I would think the hail threat would be more than the damaging wind threat, and you could get some pretty large hailstones out of this with the amount of dry air that we have and the amount of instability that would be present. I wouldn't be surprised if you see about 2-inch hailstones being produced by any of the storms that could get going during the afternoon hours. Now, I do want to address this. Go ahead.
Let me show you this real quick, though, because this could throw a wrinkle in everything. Check out the model data right there. It says PDS tornado, and look at the shear that it has off of this one sounding. The 0 to 1 kilometer is 342.
Where is that located at?
Right over Tuscaloosa.
Is that the NAM or is that the HER?
That is the 3-kilometer NAM.
I'm gonna look at that. That's a little bit different now. And it could just be there's one run that just kind of went a little haywire. But the latest, everything that I have seen is once you get into the afternoon hours, the wind shear really starts to decrease across the area. Let me pull this up real quick. Because I was just about to address that the STP values on this are getting inflated because of just the amount of instability. So let me see. This is going to be, I see it. That's Let me go forward.
And by the way, I've got it up on your computer now.
Yeah. Let me show you the last run that it had. This is the 12Z. And we'll go back just 1 hour here. And then so it's putting out this PDS tour, and it has the instability there. But look how much dry air you have.
Yes.
And from about the 700 millibar level all the way up. So you can get updrafts that go into that environment, but there's just a lot of dry air there. And you're also getting some convective inhibition going on here. That's that orange line that you see there. So the atmosphere really, it doesn't get unstable until you get to about the 850 level. So the cloud bases would be too high for producing any tornado potential with that.
Yes.
I would say, and that was the 12Z run. So even though it put out that PDS tour over there, it's being inflated because you have good instability. And there is still wind shear there, and it's not SRH is being pumped up because you're getting speed shear going on here as opposed to directional shear because your surface winds are at the southwest.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't really count on that because it seems like it's overdoing some of the things here. And that's what I was going to get at is some of these parameters, these STP parameters that are going on here. One of my colleagues I believe he's over in Georgia, was talking about it earlier, where you're getting some of these STP values here, especially according to a HER model, where you're getting values. Whoop, that's the instability. Let me go to the STP values. You're getting these values getting maximized here, but the problem is it's happening when the wind shear is starting to decrease. So the way that the parameter works is it goes off of instability wind shear, and I believe it also includes the LCL heights. I'm not entirely positive about that, but I think it includes where the cloud bases are going to be.
Right.
So he made a great analogy with this, and he says basically, I look at the STP as it's a check engine light on your car. And without a code reader, you see that check engine light. It's like, okay, well, obviously something's going on here. So then let's pop the hood. Let's check under the hood and see what's going on. And
Yes.
there could be one or two things going on. One, there's actually a big problem going on. And in this case, it would be, if you're talking about STP values, then okay, there's going to be a huge tornado threat.
Yeah.
Or it could be something relatively simple like your gas cap is off, or there's something just minorly loose
Mm-hmm.
under the hood, and that would mean that okay, well, there's a big amount of the check engine light is on. There's a huge STP value, but it's really nothing to worry about.
Right.
So that's a great analogy. I never really thought of it like that. But the case that's going on here is you're going to have a lot of instability present. So that's one aspect of the parameter. So if you have, say, 3,000 joules of CAPE out there, but you only have about 100 low-level SRH or wind shear going on, then your STP value could be a 5.
Right.
And that's just because the instability value is so high here. But it's something we'll have to watch. So I'll click on the highest one here, and this would be south of Montgomery. And yeah, there is a little bit more backing of the winds there, and it's possible that things could be turning a little bit more towards there could be a little bit better tornado potential with this. But the timing appears to be off, because once you head further into the afternoon hours, when you start really getting unstable here, notice how the winds start to back off and they start to veer off to the southwest.
Yes.
So you still get a little bit of turning of the winds with height. The best tornado threat I still think would be closer to the Montgomery area and further closer to the Gulf Coast. But I think these values are being overdone here just because of the amount of instability that is present. Let me look at the. Let me pull up the GFS real quick. We'll take a look at a GFS sounding here, and this is going to pop up your energy helicity index. So this is going to be 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll put it just to the south of Tuscaloosa here, and notice how the winds are off to the west here, and the SRH values. Usually, what I do, and is a good rule of thumb, if you are looking for tornado potential, you want your surface to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity, this number here, to be about 150 or higher. That's when you start to get really enough spin in the updraft to where you can get some tornado potential going on here. But the limiting factor is going to be the surface wind and how it starts out of the southwest. And you do get some turning. Don't get me wrong. You do get some turning of the winds, but there's really no big directional wind shear going on here. There's just some speed shear, and that's contributing to that lower SRH value there. Instability looks good, but still there's some dry air going on there. And one other thing we have to keep in mind here is you can have an atmosphere here that could become very favorable for severe weather Saturday afternoon, but there's really no lifting mechanism going on here. So if you don't have enough lift, you're not going to get the storms. And so the atmosphere, even though it could be primed for producing damaging winds, large hail, maybe even tornadoes, you wouldn't end up getting any storms that develop. But that's a possibility. Justin is talking about look at the Alabama-Georgia border. So I'm going to do this one over here north of Auburn. This is off the GFS. A little bit better storm relative helicity. Again, that's speed shear base, and that definitely can, don't get me wrong, it's still shear. It's just a different type of shear, and it can still do the same thing. Look at the higher resolution NAM. And we'll go about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here, and it's back. So the closer you get, or further east you get during the day, from the Alabama-Georgia border, and then into Georgia, and even into parts of the Carolinas, if you're going to end up getting a decent tornado threat happening, it would be in that area. It would be south of I-20, and then it would be east of the state of Alabama more than likely, because that's where you're still getting a little bit more better low level moisture. You're getting the peak heating of the day happening, and stability will be going up. And over there, you get more back surface winds, and so you would get a little bit more tornado potential. Excuse me, with that. So again, basically in a nutshell, the parameters on this are definitely they're not I would say completely eye popping, meaning that oh my gosh, major outbreak coming our way. I think they're overdone a bit. They're just slightly inflated just because the instability values are going to be higher here. And I'm basically talking about the state of Alabama. If you get into Georgia, I do think that there could definitely be a decent tornado threat that materializes down here across the southern part of Georgia and maybe into parts of northern Florida where you still get a little bit more better moisture return. The timing is a little bit better. It's coming in during the daytime. But for the state of Alabama, I don't really see this being much of an issue, big time severe weather wise. I still think that there could definitely be some rough storms that come in our direction during the morning hours, but the afternoon stuff. If we get this, if you get a little bit better convergence going on along the front, I think you get some storms that develop. But by that time, the way that the wind fields are oriented, you get more line segments and you get more damaging wind potential and also the larger hail, and the tornado threat is extremely low. Now, the further you get into Georgia, you can get these discrete cells that develop out ahead of it, like you see here, according to the NAM, and those could be supercells, and they could pose all forms of severe weather with that.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's what I have with that. It's that morning wave. I think for Mississippi and into Alabama, that's going to be our main issue. That's where you can see all forms of severe weather, damaging winds, large hail, and some tornadoes, mainly along and south of I-20. But again, that morning, where you are located, if you're located along and south of I-20, your severe weather threat is going to be completely dependent upon is there instability? Is there instability for these storms to ingest? And it's possible that, especially if you get a meso low, it can bring in just enough Gulf of Mexico moisture and just enough instability to where it can ride literally a very thin line of instability right along and just ahead of the storms that they can tap into, and they could pose some risk, some severe weather risk during the morning. The afternoon still is somewhat of a question. I think now that the way that it looks like it could be setting up, I think we do get them stable during the afternoon. But again, how much lift, how much convergence is left with that front moving on in, and that could either produce storms or not really produce storms. I can see another little thing that might could happen, and that would be if you get any rain-cooled boundaries in place, and they could be focused for new storms. Sometimes you can get that, but the main upper-level forcings moving off, and the only real lifting mechanism in place is going to be that front or any boundaries that are out there. So
Yes.
It's the morning round. Definitely, it's a lower end severe weather risk, but the afternoon round, especially for Alabama, is on the conditional side of things. I'm more confident that we're going to be seeing morning storms that could be pretty rough as opposed to afternoon storms developing. But, we got one more day to really watch this, look at the models and see what they're hinting at. Definitely looks like maybe the models are upping the wind fields just a little bit, maybe during the late morning into the early afternoon hours. So it's one of those where you definitely don't want to look away from it by any means, because it is a severe weather risk. But I don't see this being a major severe weather risk day.
Right.
So Justin is saying it's going to depend on how fast and how north the warm front rises. And yeah, you're going to get two areas. kind of warm fronts going on here. So the first one is going to be that morning. That's where your instability is going to be located. So here's your warm front down here, like that, and this is going to be your prefrontal trough moving through right here, and so that moves in. So that's depending on how far north this gets during the morning time frame, because excuse me, that's not the prefrontal trough. That's the cold front is going to be kind of back in this area. That kind of draped feature. The prefrontal trough moves in. That's that first. That's with this batch moving in here. So one of the things is a question mark, and the Weather Service has talked about this. The Storm Prediction Center has also talked about this. That prefrontal trough outrunning the best moisture return.
Yes.
So there's your front. There's your warm front. Here's your cold front, kind of right through here. And how far north it gets, I think you're definitely going to get 60 dew points up to about the Tennessee border, maybe even further north than that. But there's this other little area here that's going to be the dividing line from the very rich moisture and the not so rich moisture. And so that's where the bulk of your instability is going to be. It's going to be where you're seeing dew points in the 70s and upper 60s. So, yeah, the morning wave is how far north does this warm front get, this instability axis? How far does it get? And I will say this, with the amount of shear going on here and the forcing, especially with that prefrontal trough, it's not going to take much instability to keep storms strong or even severe.
Right.
But in order to get that more robust, higher severe weather risk, the instability needs to overlap things, and it's not really overlapping things until you get to the afternoon hours. And then by that time, the question remains, is there too much dry air in place? Is there enough lift out there for any storms to get going?
Right.
And so basically in a nutshell, morning wave, definitely confident that's going to come through. It could be pretty rough in some spots with damaging winds, maybe some hail, and maybe an isolated tornado or two. But then there's a lot of questions going on with the afternoon round. But I think it's possible. It's definitely possible we could get some storms going on during the afternoon. But the way that the wind fields still look, and I mean, there's another day to watch this, and if some of the models still kind of hint at maybe you're getting a little bit more backing of the surface winds, a little bit more better low-level wind field going on in the afternoon, as previously thought, then maybe that tornado risk kind of goes up just a little bit. I still think it's on the relatively lower side of things in the afternoon because I think the cloud bases are going to be a little bit too high.
Right.
But it's something we'll have to watch. Definitely don't want to turn your back to it, but I can definitely tell you with confidence that it doesn't look to be a major outbreak type of situation going on.
But it just has to take one coming down your street or your road to be.
It does.
Yeah. So
it does, and it's one of those where if you look at a larger scale of things, and you Stephen or me or other people here, they might not see severe weather Saturday and think, oh well, it really wasn't that bad. It might not be bad on a larger scale of things, but you could get a tornado that ends up going down somebody's street and produce some pretty significant damage, and to them, their whole world has now been turned upside down. And it's these type of events that they don't show the big outbreak type of setup going on, but at the same time I can see where there could be some nasty storms that come through and could produce some damage, whether that's from straight line winds or tornado. And it might be one of those things where it comes on through and you're fine, and all of a sudden there's that one little storm or one little part of the line that just outdoes the rest of it, and produce a pretty significant tornado. That's what happened with the Fultondale tornado back in what was that, January?
Yes,
I believe. I want to say that we had a slight risk in place for the Birmingham metro and the Fultondale area. I know it wasn't a big risk; it was definitely on the lower side of things. and everything was looking good, looking good, looking good. Storms are relatively behaving themselves, and all of a sudden,
Just
there
one
it
time.
is,
Yep.
just ramped up right there and produced what was it? It was an EF3, wasn't it? An
Yes.
EF3 tornado uh, in the Fultondale community. So it does only take that one, and so that's what we're going to be doing. Have a way to get warnings in case they're needed early Saturday morning, and then again, if you have any plans Saturday afternoon, make sure you have warnings just in case a storm does develop and some certain things go a certain way, and you end up dealing with not only some hail, but maybe even a tornado issue.
Yes.
But we'll watch it. We'll watch the radars, very closely, and just hopefully we'll get through this just once again where it's just a line of storms that comes on through. It's relatively behaving themselves, maybe some gusty winds here and there, and that's it. And if there's any storms that developed in the afternoon, they're actually not too bad.
Well, what are you seeing after this, though? Because I know we usually like to do, what the pattern's going to.
We're getting into another active pattern. I can go ahead and tell you that we're getting into another active pattern. It's been relatively quiet, severe weather wise over the past few weeks, but we are getting back into an active pattern. This severe weather threat that comes through on Saturday, that looks to be, at least for the southeastern part of the United States, that should be our last severe weather risk for the next several days. Then we'll possibly get another risk we're watching next Wednesday, Thursday-ish time frame. The models are kind of going a little back and forth on what exact timing it will be, and I'm not surprised by that with it being about a week out. I would be leaning more towards a slower solution with that one. That's the way that the trough looks like it's coming in. It looks like it could kind of lag behind a little bit. And so that would push things more towards a maybe Thursday morning to Thursday afternoon time frame.
And
I
that
will
would be
say
better for us.
this. Do what?
That'd be better for severe weather.
It would be the timing wise, yeah, it would be better for severe weather. And I will go ahead and say this. The way that this severe weather risk for Saturday looks to be kind of setting up and stuff, it doesn't look to be that robust, at least for Mississippi and Alabama. Now, I think like I said, there could definitely be some pretty rough storms in the afternoon across parts of Georgia and Florida, maybe even the Carolinas. But I will say this: looking at this one's overall setup, the one that looks to be coming up next week, especially for the plains and maybe even into parts of our neck of the woods, that would have a better severe weather potential with it. And there's two things going on with that I can kind of point at, which could be going in that direction. One, we're going to be warming up into the 80s for several days leading up to when that system moves in. Basically, I would say all of Alabama is going to be in the low to mid 80s as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. And I honestly do think that there could be some places close to Montgomery, Mobile, closer to coast, where they could be around the 90-degree mark by Wednesday afternoon. So you're going to get a lot of warm air moving on in. There should be a decent amount of moisture return ahead of it. The models have kind of been varying on the values, but at this point, I don't really specifically look at the values. I just look to see, okay, is there actually southerly winds coming up? Is there actually a signal that there should be moisture return in place? And there does. It looks like we should have some decent moisture return out ahead of it. The only question that I have with this would be the way that the trough moves in. The European and the GFS are having two completely different looks when it comes to this system. But if you take the GFS, and I can actually pull it up real quick so I can show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. It might be better to kind of visualize it.
Okay.
So so that's that weekend's. So this is what's going to happen. This is Tuesday, and there is a severe weather risk outlined here for Tuesday into Wednesday from the Storm Prediction Center. I do think there could definitely be an outbreak of severe weather going on here across parts of the plains. And then that trough, notice here, those are the red lines here, really dipping in. And the GFS runs have continued to show, I'm hesitant to say an ominous look because I know it's so far out, but the overall look is getting better. if you're looking for a threat for severe weather. With the surface low kind of in that better general zone here, this is 1 a.m. Thursday morning. And so I think what we could be dealing with here is you get the storms that develop off to our west on Tuesday into Wednesday, and then more storms develop Wednesday afternoon across Arkansas, and it forms into kind of a line or so. And we're dealing with the squall line that starts coming through late Wednesday into Thursday morning. But notice how it does weaken things. But again, it's several days out, so all I'm looking at is just the pattern type of look, surface low placement. The trough gets kicked in here pretty good. So the look of it, at least by the GFS, is a little bit better. And here's the 500 millibar height. So there's your trough moving on in, and that's a pretty nasty trough here. Yep. And you do notice how there's little bulges that come around here. So what should happen is you get this big trough that moves in. You're going to get these little impulses or short waves that develop along it, and that's what's going to kick off these showers and storms. You see here, there's a little bulge down here. There's another one rounding it here, and so that one takes on a negative tilt. And so it definitely has that look for severe latter part of next week or the middle to late part of next week. So that's something we'll have to watch for. And then after that, one of the things to watch is, the GFS kind of continues to pull it around here. And if that does happen and that kind of lingers, you're going to be seeing several days with some clouds and some spotty showers. And then we warm up again. Another big-time ridge setting up across the area for the beginning of May. And we look like it could remain active. More troughing off to our west and systems moving on into the plains we'll have to watch for once they come across our area. Let me go real quick and show you the European model. Yeah, let me show you the European model. And this one doesn't look as impressive. It does across the plains. And then once it gets to our area, and this is where it's having a slower solution. And this is Thursday at 1, and everything's hanging back to the west. But notice how it has the trough. It really shears it out, and it's basically just this kind of disoriented long wave trough going on here. It was sharp to begin with, and then it really just falls apart, and then we just get a kind of a weaker system come on through. It actually produces a cutoff low here across the Baja California Peninsula down here off to the coast of Mexico. So it's possible. I will say this, that the way that it looks like it could be setting up, I don't really buy this solution by the European model right now. It doesn't really fit the pattern. And that's kind of the thing that we have to look at. It doesn't really fit the pattern to where you get this big time trough moving in. And usually when that happens, as you see here with the GFS, it continues on.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I'm not completely disregarding the European look, but just the way that the pattern looks like it's setting up, it looks like it would favor more of this GFS solution where you're getting more active weather coming on in, and that could spell some severe weather issues for our area coming up on either Wednesday night or Thursday. That timing is still kind of up in the air, but I just wanted to show that that's just it's better to visualize that with me talking over it as opposed to just me talking, and you don't have anything to look at.
But all right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the forecast with Stingray and TP. Once again, just make sure you have a way of receiving warnings during the pre-dawn hours on Saturday morning, just in case we get a rogue severe storm and or a tornado warning.
Yeah, and that's just the best way to approach it, especially with these slider risks, the kind of lower end risk, which it's still hard for us in the media field and really just the weather field in general to communicate that well to the general public. I think most everybody has a good idea now, especially if you lived in more severe weather prone areas like us here in the South, to where you know that, okay, when you start seeing a slight risk, you start seeing, the potential for,
Yes.
some pretty rough storms. To look out, have to look out, kind of know what's going on. But of course, everybody I think pretty much knows once you start getting enhanced, moderate, and high,
Yeah.
there's a lot more stuff going on
Yes.
that day. But this is just one of those days where there is a risk for sure. Will it actually pan out to where we get something? Who
We don't know.
knows? It's definitely one of those where I could see it being where you're going to get some pretty nasty storms coming on through with some damaging winds and maybe a couple of tornadoes. And
Yep.
on the other hand, I see that the instability just doesn't really get far enough north, and that prefrontal trough with the first batch of storms, when it comes in, it just outpaces the better moisture return and better instability. And once they move in, all the storms become elevated, and all you're dealing with is just the heavy rain potential, maybe some small hail, maybe some gusty winds, but the tornado threat gets almost zero when that happens.
I
I will
do
say
like.
this: the heavier rain threat would be the higher threat
Yeah.
with this batch of storms.
So that's what I also wanted to show real quick before we leave is that yes, we've been talking about severe weather, but regardless of whether you see severe weather or not, you are going to see a lot of rain along the 2059 corridor and especially from Tuscaloosa, Birmingham over to Anniston and points to the south.
Yeah, and one of the good things that is going in our favor to kind of limit the overall flooding potential is we've been dry over the past several days.
Yes.
So we're not. It's not like we're coming at this where it's been raining for the past 3 days
Right.
and the soil is already saturated. So if we get training of the storms going on during the morning hours, then I think you could potentially end up having an isolated, localized flash flooding risk. But I think most of this is just going to be, hey, we're getting 2 to 3 inches of rain with this system, and it's it's just going to be rain. It's going to be beneficial to the
Yes.
to the um, to the ground because we've been dry. So that goes through. What did they say? That's 7 p.m. Friday through 7 p.m. Saturday.
Yes, 7 p.m. Friday
Yeah,
through 7 p.m. Saturday. And
yeah,
basically, for those of you who are curious, this is basically the 2 to 3 inches is basically from the Tuscaloosa Metro down to the Black Belt area across Marengo, Greene, Hale, Bibb, Perry, and Sumter counties as well.
yeah. And so like I mentioned, you get this is probably the bigger threat
Yeah,
is with these storms is you're going to be seeing some heavy rainfall. And then you start dealing with that isolated severe threat with the damaging winds, some hail, and maybe a tornado or two. So one of the things I'll end with this on my side of thing. This is where the tricky part happens in trying to forecast this stuff
yeah,
is going back on past events and seeing how some of these mesolows can throw a curveball at you. I go back to the that Hoover tornado that happened. I think it was back in December of 2020. The one
yes,
that happened with no thunder, no lightning, and the dew point I believe was about 50. I think it was like 57 or
yeah.
something. It was generally below that 58 threshold for dealing with severe weather, and you end up getting a tornado out of it. If memory serves, I want to say there was a meso low going on in that near that area,
Right.
uh, um, kind of general location. So what? I don't want to dive into too big technical details with it, but basically, in a nutshell, what the meso low does is it's an area of low pressure, but it's on a more localized scale. It's kind of like think about how we get these MCSs, these mesoscale convective systems. That's a line of storms that is on a localized area. That's that meso low feature. You got that meso in there, mesoscale. And
Right.
so it's a smaller area of low pressure. And they can throw some curveballs at you. And that's one of the things that I've kind of been putting in the back of my mind with this is yeah, it definitely does look like a lower end severe weather risk. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes the meso low there's going to be a lot of wind shear with it. I've seen some of the forecasted soundings for where near that mesolow is going to be, and some of the SRH values in the low levels are about close to 1,000
Yes.
in some places. But on the flip side of that, it's on top of an atmosphere where the dew point is about 56 to 58 degrees, and your temperature is about that same general area as well. And there's really not a lot of instability. So yeah, I've seen I've
Okay.
seen what about Covington County? I'll get to that here in just a second.
Okay. You're
So
fine.
there could be definitely one of those situations where, like I mentioned, one of those cells could just get ramped up so quickly and you end up getting a quick tornado out of it. I don't think it's going to be a situation where tornado would be down for several minutes,
Right.
tracking for several miles. But some of those mesolow features they really ramp up the low level wind shear, and they can pull in a pretty decent amount of moisture. The way that the lows pull in, the way that we get the low level moisture return is via the wind fields. If you get stronger wind fields, you get stronger pull from the Gulf of Mexico. Think of it as just a rope. If we get a system coming in, it's tossing a rope out into the Gulf of Mexico and getting the moisture.
Yes.
And if it's pretty weak, it's pulling the rope very, very slowly. It's taking its nice, precious time for the moisture to get up in here. But if you start getting some pretty strong winds in the low levels, that rope, I'm pulling that rope as fast as I can, and that moisture just gets pulled up very, very quickly.
Yes.
One of the other things we look at is what we call the theta E advection, and that's basically that moisture return. And some of the theta E could be really, really high once it gets closer to that meso low. So that's one of the things that I have in the back of my head. I know how some of these things have gone in the past, and they can throw a curveball at you and produce a quick tornado or two, or you can get a more localized kind of area where there could be tornadoes that happen in a short time frame in a small area, and then it's done and it's over with. So Covington County, that's refresh my memory. I know the general area of where it is. That's it's not in our Birmingham viewing area.
Right. It's down there towards Montgomery.
Yeah, it's down there towards Montgomery. Basically, if you live south of I-20, you have a shot at seeing severe weather. But if you live close to Montgomery, I would say a good borderline would be the US 80 corridor that goes from Selma over to Montgomery. That corridor right there, I think, would be a good spot to say the US 80 corridor and south. You have a better shot at seeing some severe weather. So even though you're under that slight risk, if I had to draw a circle of where within that slight risk, the best chance of seeing severe weather, it would be that US 80 corridor in south.
Taylor, real quick, it is near Andalusia, Ob, and Florala. So
yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. It's closer to that area. So yeah, Covington County would be right in that general zone there, where you would have better instability to work with.
Yes.
And the timing of this would be more in your favor too, because by the time it gets to you guys, it should be getting into the mid-morning hours, and the sun's going to be coming up. Even though it should be pretty cloudy out there, you're getting that daytime heating effect going on.
Yes.
And you're getting some cooler air aloft going over that. So yeah, Montgomery over to Greenville, Troy, Dothan, Mobile. That area, that's going to be kind of your prime zone, I think, for Saturday here across the state of Alabama for dealing with a better shot at some severe weather.
Yes. All right, man. Well, I think that's all I've got, and we really want to thank you for your questions coming in tonight. And man, I got to tell you what, this is going to be rather interesting to see what the Zero Z shows later tonight, and then what tomorrow brings.
It is, and this is one of those setups, like I mentioned again, where you don't need to turn your back to it. You need to watch it. You need to have ways to get warnings. But especially me on the weather and more technical side of things, I'm very interested to see how this pans out, because these are some of your severe weather risks where the threat is there. It's not extremely high, but sometimes they can just manifest their way in kind of do their own thing and end up either just completely producing no severe weather, or you end up actually getting a decent amount of severe weather. So these are the ones that I really like to look into and dig into, and
And
kind of
that's
do some post analysis on, to see, how everything actually evolved. And that not only helps with forecasting things in the future if we get similar setups with this, but it's just you can find some things to where people can do some research on, to be like, oh well, that's very interesting. Why did that happen? And kind of find out the mechanism and stuff, and why that happens. So that's kind of what I like to do on the back end side of things with these lower end severe weather risk, and these systems that move on through, that can that they can be interesting. They can be an interesting case study with certain things.
definitely. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the forecast with Stingray and TP. Now, I do want to also mention before we leave, Tuesday is the 10-year anniversary of the April 27th historical outbreak, the Red Letter Day. And Taylor and I are going to have a pretty lengthy show recapping all of the issues that day.
Yeah, and I have some stories on my side of things. I personally didn't get impacted at my house with severe weather, but I did see some of the devastation, and it did kind of change some of my decisions and career choices, actually. So
Yes.
I'll get into that too.
So, and I actually have clips that I actually went and interviewed James Spann from 3340. I interviewed Richard Scott and some other people as well, Brian Peters. So you will hear from all of them on the next edition of the forecast with Stingray and TP, when we recap the historical tornado outbreak of 2011 next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your evening, and as always, remember, stay weather aware Saturday morning. And as
Yes,
always, God bless.
we'll see you guys. Have a good evening.